Behind the Leaf discusses cannabis in terms of education, history, culture, policy, and advocacy. It is geared for adults only. If you are not an adult, come back when you are.
Everybody, this is Pam from the LBCA, the Community Education Director, and I'm sitting here with Change from Cannabis.
Hello, everybody.
So we're here to talk to you about LBCA's new program. It's called the Compassionate Cannabis Program, the CCP, and we just launched it. And we'll tell you a little bit about it. This program came out of SB 34, and tell us how it was in like, you know, prior 64 days. Prop 64 and 215, how was compassionate care?
There was a lot of compassion in the old Prop 215 days because it was all medicinal based, and medical patients require cannabis to treat various ailments, and you know, so compassion is a big part of that, you know, and that's kind of been lost a little bit, I feel like, as we transcended into recreational cannabis, and medical kind of feels like some days it takes a back seat to things, you know, and a lot of medical patients, they need higher amounts, you know, than what is the limits are on the recreational market. And so it's cool that we're back at the bringing it to the forefront and are able to instill some compassion that's been lost over the last few years.
That's right. So what SB 34 did, it was passed late last year, and it brought that back. So it brought back pathway for patients to get free products and free medicine, like it was in Prop 215, because that was really based on people growing for others, growing that medicine for another person to use it medicinally. And we lost that. So now we have it back, and we had to make a little bit of processes and operations. It was kind of a skeletal regulations that kind of just put track and trace, so it's definitely using metric, and it just follows that, and just, you know, it's the same way as just free of charge and not taxable. Since January, before the lockdown, we started developing and creating our process for the LBCA's CCP, Compassionate Cannabis Program. And the pandemic set us back a little bit, but we're here now. So on our website, if you go to the lbca.com, you could find forms. So there's a link at the very top. It's under, I believe it says Compassionate Cannabis Program. And if you click that link, it'll take you to a couple forms. It's gonna take you to any forms to fill out. Basically, if you're a Long Beach resident, you're a cannabis patient, you're low income, and there's a special form for veterans, you can apply. So, you know, our applications are open, and processing takes a couple weeks because we're just getting started, and we got to go through that information.
What kind of information will they need to put in there?
Most of the information is, you know, your name, your address, your date of birth, how we contact you, email or text, your cannabis regimen, your doctor's information if that's possible, or it could be self-reported, which means, you know, you can just tell us what your cannabis regimen is and what you use it for. And also your low income. So low income would be we just ask about your expenses and your income. And yeah, that's about it.
That's awesome.
Yeah. For industry and our members, our LBCA members, how can they get involved?
If you are a brand that is looking to donate to the patients and to our compassion care, you can contact us also probably on our website or one of our various social media outlets. Yes. We would love to take as many brands as possible. We're looking for an assortment of arrangement of different products. So anybody is welcome to jump on board. This is a great opportunity for brands to have direct community outreach, and I think it's huge opportunity for brands to jump on the cause and show people that we're here to help people out that are in need. And we're not here, just for the recreational market. We have not forgot about the patients. And this bill gives us an opportunity to provide free product at tax-free directly to the patients. And I think it's an amazing thing. We can give back directly to our community that is in need the most. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity. I'm very excited to get started with you guys on getting this program rolled out.
I totally agree. I think like our executive director, Mr. Neal, always says that all of our problems right now in the industry are legislative.
Yep.
And it's true, and this is part of it.
Absolutely.
We had to have SB 34 passed. We thank all of those pioneers and those people behind that bill, because it wouldn't be here and we wouldn't have this program without it.
Right.
And we're also looking for a lot of different products, because everybody has a different cannabis regimen that they use for their different ailments.
Yeah, not everyone smokes.
Not everybody smokes, not everybody uses a topical or a tincture, everybody does something different for them.
Right.
So we really kind of want to tailor what people need in their packages when they pick them up.
Yeah, that's why we need as many brands, cultivators, extract artists that are interested in just joining the cause.
That's right.
The more the merrier, so we can provide that assortment for people.
Yes, and we can start this whole compassion care back up, because it's definitely missing right now.
Right.
There's a lot of people in need.
Yeah, a lot of compassion is needed.
Yes.
You could find us, Cannabis, at cannabis.com. That's Cannabis with a V. We're also on Instagram, Twitter. We have a YouTube page as well, where we show people how to use our product in our tincture lines. So you can contact us via there.
The LBCA, you can contact us on any of our socials at the LBCA on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And you can also hit us up on our website, thelbca.com.
And hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of At the Root of It. I'm Stephen Contreras, Community Outreach Director for LBCA. And today I'm here for our At the Root of It segment with OC Normal Representative and Attorney Matt Harrison. How are you doing today, Matt? Thank you for joining us.
Hey, Stephen. I'm great, man. How are you?
I'm doing well. Things I thought were getting back to normal, but we saw a little COVID spike. So we know how that's going to go, but then we don't. But let's definitely start talking some cannabis. So the first question, tell everyone a little bit about you, and then what led you into law and advocacy.
I was a co-author of Prop 64, actually, so I answered your second question first. But right now I'm an attorney and policy analyst, which I've been doing my whole life, kind of like a lifelong interest of mine. So, working with cannabis licensees, people who want to get licenses, helping, cities do a better job, everything that we need done, I try to help with.
Do you consume cannabis yourself? Were you a patient before, or you always just kind of advocated? How did you get into it?
I am a patient, and I've been an advocate as well. I've sort of, like I said, long been interested in policy, generally, and also cannabis in particular, because I like emerging areas of policy. That's kind of my specialty. So anything that's new and coming online, and cannabis is probably the biggest and best example, is what I like to specialize in. And so that background, looking at the history, looking at prohibition, comparing the history to cannabis, and understanding that was something that I used significantly during the 64 process to organize and craft that policy.
So tell me a little bit about Prop 64 and your involvement in that whole ordeal.
So I was one of the co-authors. So there's probably about 5 or 6 attorneys that were the main authors. I certainly wasn't the main one. That credit goes to Rich Madich at Olson Hagel and his partner, Lance Olson, who were number 1 and 2 for sure. But I certainly had a role in every provision, whether that be reviewing it or structuring it. And in certain areas, I did primarily author the provisions myself. And so that came about through my association with the Weed Maps and the California's for Sensible Reform PAC. I've known Justin Hartfield for a long time. So that's how we started that process. And through that, connected with Sean Parker, who of course was planning on putting a lot of money into that initiative at the time. And so through that process was sort of able to add, was a certain level of value, hopefully, and help see it to the finish line. And then here we are. Still a lot of work to be done though, for sure.
How do you feel Prop 64 was for the industry is, and what do you think can make it better?
Yeah, we have a lot of work to do. And the biggest factor, I guess that kind of goes into the what do we need to work on question. I'm hopping all over your questions here, but it's the local licenses, because the cities have control and you have to have a local license. And that's not as simple as just getting a business license. That means your city has to say we're allowing cannabis businesses, which means it's got to go through the council and all that process. And that's a gigantic barrier, and one that we had to pay the price for to get it passed. That was the League of California Cities. In order to not have them oppose the initiative, we had to give a degree of local control like that. So it's like I tell people, it's the price we pay to pass it. But the work is still remaining. So the job in Long Beach, like you guys have done, that's what we have to do, is take what has been successful, but also do more in every single city. I mean, there's no city that's done everything right. And so the work has yet to be done, but in a lot of ways, that's how it's designed. And so nobody should have expected perfection, despite the big $1 billion revenue projections, anyway. So we'll get there someday.
Projections are never reality starting off with, but like you said, we'll get there one day. I believe it. I know a lot of our LBCA members believe it as well. So you talked about barriers to entry to the industry, and like you said, there's a limit of local control. What are some other barriers to the industry to become sustainable, or just to sustain the industry we have?
Yeah, the first one's just not only the licenses at the local level, but just how the cities interact with the businesses. A lot of times, a business will get the license and they think that everything's okay, but maybe they need to expand, maybe they need to change location, they need to do things like that. And it turns out whatever it is with the city or the procedure and the ordinance doesn't really allow for that. And that they can't develop the way they need to, create the jobs that they need to, benefit the community the way they want to, and things like that. And so it's all over the place, and it's a really complex issue that doesn't really get exposed the way it needs to. It's the type of thing that people don't, want to, look into, and it's hard to kind of communicate it in a way that gets people engaged. And so all of those things at the local level everywhere, and then the state too. The taxes are huge, and then of course, and all the regulations overall in conjunction, it's a significant barrier, especially to early stage entrepreneurs looking to get into the space. So there's a lot of issues there too. And then of course you've got federal law, and you can't get away without saying that too. And there's really no sustainable industry overall until you get some sort of solution there. We've got enough of a bubble where people feel comfortable they're not going to be, practically speaking, arrested, but it's not sustainable. I mean, you don't have banking, you don't have any of those things, and you're not until there's going to be substantial federal reform as well. So, you really need all those things. So a lot of work still.
You hit that right on the head, brother. I couldn't have answered it better myself. So I know you are working with Orange County and working on cities getting licenses there. How can cannabis legalization and social equity efforts help benefit cities that want to come online or that are teetering the fence of creating policy for that?
That's a great question. And now they're starting to look at it more so than ever for, I think the reasons that you're applying, and it's not that complicated. It's money, it's jobs, it's development in the community. And we've been saying it forever. It goes back to the $1 billion, right? But how do you actually get it? One thing to promise it, but in order to have it sustainable, that's what I keep going back to, where you're not just getting a couple of licenses to a couple of people who deserve it, but really benefiting everybody, creating opportunity where kids have jobs that they can look up to and sort of that they feel good about in their community. These are things that seem simple, but are actually very difficult to deliver on in practice. And so it's getting there that is kind of the key. But the goal, I think, which is everybody's focusing on now, which is really exciting, you know, in the sense of we need money on the COVID sense, so maybe we should be looking at this again. And also, of course, the social justice aspect. There's probably no policy has as much of a racist history as drug prohibition and cannabis prohibition in particular. I mean, from the beginning, essentially, it was, you know, anti-Mexican and then became like anti-Black throughout the, you know, the course of it, and maintained it that status. So using those two facts to support it, I think, are amazing. But you still need to finish all the work that, you know, we're talking about in all of the cities, at the state level, at the federal level. So it's kind of the hard work's being started. So I'm really hopeful that we all can come together and, finish the job, finish my job, our job.
And our job is never going to be done. That's one thing we're all slowly getting day by day. It's going to be a long haul, but we're here. We're here for that long haul. And I appreciate you and everything that you've done for Prop 64 and everything that you continue to do for our industry. So thank you.
Thank you guys. Well, you guys came first. I mean, really, I have to say that, first of all, every city, every kind of collective organization that was established that showed the potential of what Prop 215 could turn into, because of course 215 was just the medical exemption, but it created the industry, the development of the industry, and showed a lot of, I mean, the potential policymakers, the people, the Sean Parkers of the world, what it actually could be if it were brought into the legal regime. And so the thanks is to you guys, because I mean, it was that the pioneers, first of all, and then, the wonks always come in after, but, we working together is what I'm all about. So,
and that's what I'm so happy that our industry is coming to. I see more and more professionals wanting to work together. I know our organizations are working very closely as well. So it's super exciting. But Matt, I want to say thank you so much for your time. For everyone watching, where can they find more information on you, your practice, and anywhere that they need to get updates?
Thanks, Stephen. My practice, you probably just go to my website, which is PROCIVLAW.com, which is procivlaw.com. It's my practice. And so any, cannabis questions, administrative law, municipal law, happy to answer, questions or advise anybody that likes to know. So appreciate it.
And as for me, you can find everything LBCA related at the LBCA on all social media platforms and the LBCA.com. But so far for us, that is this episode's of At the Root of It. Thank you so much, Matt. We really appreciate you having us on.
Thanks, Stephen.
I'm sorry for my ways, but I got more than me, I gotta try and face. Before I'm worried what another critic gotta say, I bet I'm out here trying to find another way to get away. I just vision how my mama had to get it from the grave. Digging, listening, wishing, trying to fight through all the pain. Sitting, thinking, reminiscing about a place to try to stay. Even with the doubts, had a mission in my way, that's the game. Bass so loud, you would think I lost my brain. How I'm locked inside my prison, fiction, trying to find a way. Take a look inside, you can see we are the same, but the level of the cloud seems to fog away the brain, yeah. They see me in here, I'ma back myself. The same nigga since a kid, I just catch the real. Paid attention to the grind, need a $500,000. I keep on grinding for the rest, you'll never catch me still. My wrist bigger, need 6 figures to disfigure my soul and body, so what's realer? A rich winner? How about somebody who never got it, they couldn't fit a dinner in their body? Or love somebody cause his living. I'm thinking about it, this shit be sorry. I left my body thinking I'll be a problem and probably catch a body. Everybody around me was wondering why he hiding. I wasn't even really here, you just saw it like his body. Damn, I think I'm on. I just took an 8 to shrooms and now I'm feeling grown. Think I know the world, but really no I don't. Even if you think you do, homie, know that you was wrong. Oh, no, faith, body, gone. Living in the sage, thinking I'ma lose my dome. They keep lacing what they making to tell us we living wrong. But everybody a product of where we living. I'm sorry for my ways. I'm sorry for my ways. I'm sorry for my ways. But I got more than me, I gotta try and face. Before I'm worried what another critic gotta say, I bet I'm out here trying to find another way to get away. I just vision how my mama had to get it from the grave. Digging, listening, wishing, trying to fight through all the pain. Sitting, thinking, reminiscing about a place to try and stay. Even with the doubts, had a mission in my way, that's the game. Bass so loud, you would think I lost my brain. How I'm locked inside my prison, fixing, trying to find a way. Take a look inside, you can see we are the same. But the level of the cloud seems to fog away the brain, yeah. They see me in here, I'ma back myself, the same nigga since a kid.
Like, it traumatized a lot of people. And when I got out of prison, I was like, fuck that, back to activism. That didn't bother me. And, you know, and it was more of kind of like staying on topic more than it was dwelling on drama. So I don't know. I'm more into the educational than I am. You know, like when I got out of prison, I had a lot of my friends pressuring me saying, oh, you should make a documentary about what you went through and about your story. And I was like, no, I should make a documentary about why I'm a fucking activist. So maybe I could stop being a fucking activist.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another special guest interview. My name is Gabriela Rochin, a member of the LBCA media team. We have Todd McCormick here with us on this episode of Behind the Leap. Hey, Todd.
Hey there. Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, just a couple of topics we wanted to cover. How were you introduced to cannabis?
Well, believe it or not, I smoked my first joint with my mom back when I was only 9 years old because I was going through chemotherapy and radiation. As a child, I had tumors throughout my body. First had one in my spine when I was 2 years old, and then it got 3 more in my skull, 2 in my right ear, 2 in my left hip, another one between my left lung and my heart, and then later on another one in my arm. But it was the one between my left lung and my heart that I was going through both chemo and radiational therapy. And my mom kind of thought I was at my end, if you will. And she had read in Good Housekeeping, of all places, that people were using cannabis or marijuana for medical patients. So she talked to my pediatrician, who was really open-minded for 1979. And he also felt like I was at, 9 times in 8 years was a lot. And I think that they felt like there was nothing to lose. So my mother, after coming back from treatments, she slipped me a joint in the car and told me to sip it like it was a straw. And by the time I got home, instead of feeling nauseous and horrible, I wanted her to make me some sauteed spinach and butter. And I was in pretty good spirits, and she thought she was really high or something and called my doctor. And he said, well, tomorrow, don't give him any and see how his condition is. So the next day we drove home, didn't get any pot. I came home, I threw up typically, and went up to my room to lay down. And she came upstairs with another joint. And we sat down on my floor in my bedroom, and she had a joint and I had a joint. And we listened to Don McLean's American Pie on a little 45. I used to have to flip it halfway through the song. And we sat there smoking weed, and I wanted more spinach. And my mom thought, Jesus, what did I do? And went back down and told my doctor, called him on the phone, and he thought it was great. And from that point forward, I started using cannabis with my therapy. And fortunately, that was the last time I had a tumor. I went into what they call spontaneous remission. And for about 5 years, I did not have any more tumors until one developed in my left arm. And basically, I, started using cannabis medically at that point again. But around age 12, I was given another motorcycle, and my parents were like biker hippies. And because of my spinal fusion, my neck always hurts. So I actually went to my doctor and asked him if I could get, pain medication. And he said, no. He said, there's nothing I can prescribe you that won't make you physically or mentally addictive. And, you're going to have to learn how to deal with it. And I, just was like, wow, what do I do? And he joked with me, but it ended up being a lifelong medicine. He said, you could try smoking your mom's pot. It's not your worst option. And I'm 12. I was 12, but at that point, he'd already been dealing with me, using cannabis basically since I was 9 during the chemotherapy and radiation. And I think he was mindful of the dangers of opiates. And I'm really grateful that he was, because I've lived my whole life now basically free of pharmaceuticals, using cannabis, and lived a very productive life.
Yeah.
A lot of people seem concerned when you say, "Oh, I started smoking cannabis when I was 9." They think that's young, and I think, well, cancer didn't card me. Cancer didn't care that I was a 2-year-old baby.
Exactly. Yeah, I've seen a picture of you in a cast, and you were a baby. You were. It didn't look like you were older than like 2 or 3.
No, I had the halo and the spinal. I had a whole body cast with a brace that went up the back, and they call it a halo, but it's a cast that goes around your head and holds your head straight while your spine heals. My childhood was kind of shitty, to be honest. But I'm grateful for cannabis. Yeah.
By the time you were 10, you already been through,
so much. Yeah, but I'm grateful for it. Now as a gardener, I often joke that, you take shit and you turn it into fertilizer, and then you take fertilizer and turn it into flowers. So I'm really good at turning crappy situations into beautiful harvests.
I love that. I love that. So when did you get into growing your own?
I was only 13 years old. I had traded a $20 bag of weed because I sold weed. And I traded it with my friend who just bought a book, The Insider's Guide, a Mel Frank book. And yeah, and it blew my mind. And I actually, when I went there to go see him, he was 19 years old and I was 13 at the time. So he was like really old to me. And I went to go see him. He had his own apartment, and he had built a wood box and painted it white and hung these fluorescent lights in it. And he had it in his living room where normal people would have a television. And when I walked into this room and I saw this, and we opened the doors and like the light came out and the pot plants were there, it was, like the Wizard of Oz, seeing color on film for the first time. I was just like, whoa, and I traded him the $20 bag of weed for the book, and brought the book home and cleaned up my closet and planted my seeds. I found the lights, the timer, the watering can, the pots, the soil, all in the basement. It was my grandma's stuff. The only thing I had to go purchase was fertilizer, because she didn't have any fertilizer. And suddenly I figured out why all of her houseplants died, because she never fed them.
What was the turning point for you? Like, as far as like, when did it become like just smoking and growing, and you got into like your activism?
Well, between the years of like 13 and 23, I felt the stigma of society. Going through junior high and high school, I was afraid to draw a pot leaf on a notebook, because I knew the attention it would bring me wasn't positive. And my mother was really an interesting person. Like, she held up a pack of Easy Widers when I was a kid and says, "What are these?" And I said, "Oh, they're rolling papers." She said, "No, you've never seen them before. You don't know what they are." And I was like, "What?" And then she held up a bong, and I was like, "What?" She's like, "What's this?" I said, "It's a bong." "No, you've never seen it before. If you tell them that you know what this stuff is, they'll take you away and they'll put me in jail." And I was like, "Ooh." And she was really upfront and honest with me when I was just in second grade. I was like 7 years old. She did that. And I think it was helpful, because it created a bond between me and my mom that was truthful and honest. And she kind of showed me what the real world was really like, unfortunately judgmental and, not very fair. So it was a positive moment for me, I think. And then going forward, I started learning about cannabis. I would go to the library, and I picked up the book Marijuana, The First 12,000 Years by Ernest Abel. And then this book, which became a milestone to me, which is Marijuana Reconsidered by Dr. Lester Grinspoon. He was a Harvard professor that was one of the first professors to seriously write about cannabis in a positive way. And he really broke the mold. And he was a voice against the draconian measures that were coming down, with the Controlled Substances Act and the Nixon administration. And he was really a lone voice of reason in a very dark time for us.
Yeah, he wrote Marijuana, the Forbidden Medicine, Marijuana Reconsidered. That was Lester Grinspoon.
He had quite a career. He even wrote the book Psychedelics Reconsidered, and his work was profound. He was really incredible. Dr. Lester Grinspoon unfortunately just passed away on Thursday, a day after his 92nd birthday. He was a wonderful human that really, I mean, for almost 50 years was an activist on an academic level, arguing for another look, or to look at marijuana in a reconsidered way. And I think that he played a big role in other doctors taking it seriously. Yeah, back in the 80s when I was trying to learn about this stuff, there weren't very many books available. And it wasn't until 1993 that I actually read The Emperor Wears No Clothes by Jack Herer that it really changed my world. Because once I read his book, it was like the hub of understanding on a very confusing subject. I mean, when people stop and they think about, the wagons going west and the canvas-covered wagons, they really don't think that canvas is a cognate of the word cannabis, and all canvas came from the cannabis plant. All the ropes, all the riggings, all the paint, varnish, all the maps, Bibles, clothing that was on the Columbus's ship was made out of cannabis. I mean, most of Europe was culturally had a cultural evolution because of the cannabis plant. Because when you look back at like the book Marijuana, the First 12,000 Years, it talks about the invention of paper, how that was something that happened in China, and it was a combination of using hemp and mulberry. And this was profound for humanity. I mean, paper is something we take for granted every day, clothing as well. I mean, if you look at the invention of the cotton gin, it didn't come along until 1791. But we had hundreds of thousands of years of wearing clothes, and those clothes were mostly made out of hemp. So cannabis played this really profound role that I didn't really understand until I read Jack's book. And when I read Jack's book, it blew me away. It blew me away so much that I called the number on the back, and they told me they were doing an initiative to try to legalize cannabis. And I, from being from the East Coast, didn't really know what an initiative was, because I came from a state where we did not have the initiative process. And I had no idea that you could get 500,000 signatures and put a ballot on the, for consideration by the voters and potentially change laws you didn't like. So I jumped in and met Jack in January of 1994, and we became best friends. And I started working with him as the San Diego Hemp Initiative coordinator, gathering signatures for him in San Diego. And, Jack was a very magnetic personality. He was like a father and a teacher and just a great human. And I ended up spending a lot of time with him working on the initiative and traveling around. We used to go to colleges, and we would go to Kinko's and photocopy pages of his book. And then we'd go to the colleges and literally pass out paper to people and try to educate them along the way. And that was activism initially. Jack had a booth on Venice Beach on the boardwalk, and we would stand there, and everyone that would walk by, whoever would engage us, we would tell them about cannabis, the history of hemp, the history of cannabis as a medicine, marijuana, whatever they would talk about, because we were trying to convince people that they should take this seriously.
You worked on the cover of Emperor Wears No Clothes, right? Designed.
I started working on Jack's book in 1994. We revised it in 1997 and 1998. And I helped design the cover with the pot leaf in the middle. I grew the pot leaf that's on the cover, and it's Black Domino. And it's been really a heck of a journey. I was the editor of his book from 1994 all the way until he passed away in 2010. And then when he passed away in 2010, we reissued the 12th edition of his book, complete with memorials in it to Jack, and reorganized the book a little bit. And people can still get that. I think it's in limited release, but it's beautiful. I mean, Jack's book was really the catalyst that brought us the modern cannabis hemp movement, whereas, organizations like NORML were focused on civil liberties, and thinking that it should be decriminalized and adults should have a right to smoke. Jack came along and really taught us the history of hemp and paper and varnish and gave us all this context that ended up really being the wind in the sail, so to speak, that really pushed cannabis legalization to the next level. Because out of his work, we saw the hemp industry be born. And, now it's a pretty formidable multi-billion-dollar a year industry. 25 years ago, it didn't exist.
What do you think Jack would say now if he was alive?
He would be thrilled. I mean, Jack's whole goal was to stop people being arrested and to get the prisoners out of jail. And, Jack and I and others, we were never activists to protect the profits of small growers or, to keep the price artificially high. We were there to liberate and to bring access to people. And a lot of people have tried to say that Jack would be against the legalization we have now, but I don't think so. A lot of people try to say that Jack was against taxation, yet we wrote it right into the initiative. Jack taxed cannabis at literally $10 an ounce, which I thought was totally wrong. And we would fight like mad over it because I felt that it should be taxed on its appropriate value. And at the time, an ounce of cannabis was $400. So $10 on 400 seemed like not much, but I would say, what happens to the day when cannabis costs less than $10 a pound and you've got to pay $160 tax on a $10 item? That's not right. And so Jack, in my opinion, was learning as well and trying to evolve with things. And I think he would understand the evolution. A lot of people don't know it, but at first Jack was against Proposition 215 and medical cannabis because he felt like the initiative did not go far enough. It didn't get people out of jail. It didn't legalize the common smoker. He felt we should have a right to cannabis. We should have a right to the hemp industry. And medical cannabis was just not enough. And he felt like it was dangerous to pass it because people might grow complacent and not fight for their rights and not fight for their full freedom. And in a sense, he was right, because ironically, around 2015 and 2016, when California voters passed Proposition 64, we had a lot of people within the industry arguing against the legalization, mainly, in my opinion, because they saw the writing on the wall. They didn't want to see their profit margins drop. They didn't want to see competition on every corner. They didn't want to see mom and pops down the street growing cannabis because they had a lock on it. And I don't think that was helpful to any of us. And while I am grateful for 215, I'm glad that it is now past us, because for 20 years, I mean, for me personally, I was arrested. I was raided for cultivating cannabis and nothing more 4 times in the 20 years that we had Proposition 215. I was prosecuted 4 times because I never cooperate for every single time. I spent 5 of the 20 years that we had it sitting in a federal prison cell because it did not protect us from the state, from the federal government, such as what Prop 64 does. The problem with 215 was it didn't really legalize our activities. It only legalized the right to present a medical necessity defense after you were raided and after you were arrested and after they cut your plants down and potentially shot your dog and dragged you through court. Only then could you present a letter from your doctor and say, hey, I'm sick, please go easy on me. So I was grateful to see Prop 64 pass, because now medical patients have an actual legal right to grow cannabis, and so do adults. Every single adult in the state of California can legally possess and grow 6 cannabis plants. And now someone who's arguing from a medical perspective is arguing from a perspective of a more powerful space, because now they have a legal right to it. And then it just becomes a question of how much of it do they have a legal right to have. So to me, Proposition 64 strengthened our rights as medical patients under 215, if that makes sense. Because 215 is still the law of the land. And if you get busted for growing, you can still bring your doctor's note to the judge and say, hey, I've got a medical condition, and they should consider it. But now the chances of you being dragged into court are completely minimalized because of the fact that you have a legal right to grow those plants. And if you have a legal right to own a car, you could be Jay Leno and have a whole garage full of cars. Or if you're some eccentric gun owner, you can have a house full of guns. Or if you're a wine collector, you can have a basement full of wine. So realistically, once you have the right to possess something, the quantity of the amounts of what you can have become very easy to argue. So most of us that have cannabis won't be getting busted anymore because we're growing, a dozen or 2 dozen plants in our yard, because they're not going to be able to get a conviction on us. So I think it's been a very positive thing. And I think if Jack was around today, what he would be most happy about is the state having to expunge the convictions of people that were arrested for cannabis in the past 50 years. And in places like LA County, we're talking over 100,000 people getting their records cleared. Santa Cruz was thousands, San Francisco was tens of thousands, and this is going on all over the state. So I think it's a really good thing.
You had mentioned before how you think hemp oil, how it acts as a solvent when you leave it in the fridge, but you can add, you said shatter. Why shatter?
Shatter's very clean. So in short, what I was talking about is 25 years ago when I started working on Jack's book, I met Dr. Roberta Hamilton, who is a UCLA nutritional professor. She was rather old at the time I met her, and she didn't smoke cannabis, but she was very passionate about cannabis being used as a food source. And when I say this, I'm talking about just the seed. There are no cannabinoids in the seed, but there are a perfect balance of essential fatty acids, which science is showing that we really need for our overall health. And she heard me speaking about my cancer history on stage one day, and she pulled me aside and she said, "Hey, Todd, you really got to learn this. This is really going to help you long term." So she sat me down and she taught me about the perfect balance of linoleic and linolenic acids in hemp seed oil, and how it has gamma-linoleic acid, GLA, which is rare for a seed. It also has the oils in a perfect balance for human consumption, which is something you do not see in nature. And she made the point to me that this is something you need. And it's interesting because when she taught me this stuff back in 1994, we did not know what an endocannabinoid system was. We didn't know we had what we call as the ECS. We did not know that fatty acids are the precursors to our body's ability to create endocannabinoids and balance our body and balance our health. So she was really ahead of her time. But she got me using hemp seed oil. I use about a teaspoon per 50 pounds of body weight per day. So I weigh like 150, 160 pounds. I use about a tablespoon, which is about 15 grams of oil. You can get cold pressed oil from any health food store, and it makes profound differences in your life. It modulates the way that our body responds to inflammation. EFAs can help us with our overall mood, anxiety, sleeping. Anybody that's watching this should just literally punch in mega fatty acids and then whatever condition that they're kind of stressing over. And there's a lot of research on EFAs and our health now. This is something we did not know that long ago. And if you look at the evolution of our understanding of food in the 20th century, it's been profound. I mean, we did not start adding vitamins and minerals to our food until literally the 30s and 40s. And that is telling, because a lot of the diseases that we have overcome we overcame because of proper nutrition. And then we didn't really get into the 60s until we started understanding EFAs, and we really didn't start understanding their true importance until the 80s. And I still don't think we really understand how important this nutrition is to us. So I actually started using it 26 years ago under her kind of recommendation, and after reading about it in Jack's book. And I was sitting one day in my house, and I was getting high, and I was using Marinol because I was I was going through prosecution, and the government allowed me to use Marinol, which is THC in a pill, and it is basically a synthetic cannabinoid suspended in sesame oil, encapsulated in gelatin. And one night I had just used an AB epoxy in my house, which is like two resins that you mix together and it becomes hard and you can use it in the house to fix things. And I was staring at my Marinol and I thought, wow, I wonder if Mother Nature gave me the two-way epoxy, so to speak, in cannabis, because there are the resin glands that fall off of cannabis that are the trichromes that are responsible for hashish. And then there is the oil that comes out of the seed. So instead of sesame oil and a synthetic cannabinoid, I went and I poured some hemp seed oil in a frying pan. I heated it up, and then I poured some resin powder, which is like what we call trichromes. They're just the little crystals after they've been sieved off the cannabis, and they melted into the oil. And I used it like a butter, and I put it on some muffins, and I got really too high. And that's when I started playing with it in a cold way. Because what I was doing is taking hemp seed oil and you can actually grind up cannabis and put it in a mason jar and then pour hemp seed oil and then close it and let it sit in the refrigerator. If you take it out like a few days, a week later, the oil will actually act as a solvent and it will dissolve the trichromes, because they're also an oil. They're a little cuticle layer of wax. And then what happens is that the oil itself becomes infused with what are called phytocannabinoids. When cannabis makes a cannabinoid, it's a phytocannabinoid. When your body makes a cannabinoid, it's called an endocannabinoid. But in between, they're just cannabinoids. And these cannabinoids are actually little molecules that help your body modulate its whole system. It creates what's called homeostasis, and homeostasis is really balance. So a lot of people have asked me, when they look up cannabis, they're like, well, cannabis is an immune suppressant. How can that help? Well, it helps in profound ways, because a lot of times our body overreacts to a situation. So when you use cannabis is like a governor on a truck that you're going to rent out. The truck may be capable of doing 100 miles an hour, but when you rent it out, you only want it to do 55. You don't want them to go too fast. So the cannabis actually acts to moderate our body's experience when it comes to dealing with whatever condition we have. Because a lot of times our body swells up, and the swelling is the problem. And cannabis basically holds our body back from swelling up, and basically suppresses an overaction or an over response to our body, or our immune system's overreaction to a condition. So cannabis acts in a really powerful way. And when I started thinking about it, I started using the oil mixed with the phytocannabinoids, if you will, because what happens is there's something called decarboxylation. So decarboxylation is when you heat up cannabis and it becomes psychoactive. Until you heat up cannabis, it really doesn't affect you the same way. Meaning that, like, if you eat a flower, a bud, you won't really feel it. But if you smoke that flower, you'll feel it. It'll be great. When people are making brownies, you can't just dump some weed into the brownie mix. You got to cook it. And usually people cook it in butter. And then the fat acts as a solvent and dissolves those trichromes. And then the cannabinoids infuse in the butter. And then you get rid of the plant material. And you've got phytocannabinoid infused butter that was heated up. So now it's psychoactive. But I think that the non-psychoactive versions of the phytocannabinoids, so if you were to take some cannabis and grind it up and put it in a mason jar and fill it full of hemp seed oil and let it sit, and then basically screen off the plant material, the leaves and such, you would have phytocannabinoid-enriched oil that was not heated up, has a perfect balance of essential fatty acids, and is the most healthy thing you can put in your body. Because if you have a child that's dealing with, seizures or some type of condition that you want to mitigate, but the child still has to go to school and be clear-headed and everything, you really don't want to give the kid a bunch of decarboxylated THC because it'll get the kid high, and instead of paying attention in school, be looking at the color of their pencil. But I think that we can basically receive the benefits of cannabis as like a cannabinoid therapy without having the high get in our way, because the high impedes us from actually using a lot of the cannabinoids that our body actually can use positively. So I think the next breakthrough in cannabis will be using cannabis in a non-psychoactive way. And I believe in the future, you'll probably see phytocannabinoids put in our food. Because when they're not psychoactive, you don't really feel it. But science is now starting to understand that our body, it not only needs cannabinoids, it makes its own cannabinoids to modulate its body. So I think a lot of the reasons why so many of us might be, once we use cannabis, we like it so much is because our body, when we're not getting in enough essential fatty acids, cannot make the endocannabinoids it needs. So it craves it from an outside source. And when somebody, lights a joint for the first time, it profoundly affects their whole being. And they realize, wow, this is good for me. I want to keep using cannabis. And I mean, 20 years ago, that decision meant facing jail and facing a judge and potentially, losing your livelihood. But a lot of people made that decision because cannabis created such a positive effect in their life.
That's actually where I was going to go with that, like where you see the future of cannabis. But you kind of touched on it a little bit, like how you say you think it would be used in food.
Oh, definitely. I think the future of cannabis is really bright. A lot of people are afraid of corporate cannabis, but I'm not. I can't wait until you can walk into every supermarket and there's Campbell's cannabis in a can for 89 cents an ounce or whatever. People don't realize it, I think, but, cannabis grows on trees. And, when we go and we get, organic dried tomatoes, they're less than $10 a pound. And realistically, we shouldn't be paying, $100 a pound for organic broccoli, no matter how carefully they grew that broccoli. It's still just a vegetable. And cannabis is still just a flower. And I believe until we really have corporate cannabis, we're not going to have the prices dropping to real affordability for a majority of people. I mean, cannabis, in my opinion, is the people's medicine. You don't need a laboratory. You don't need some fancy doctor. You can grow it in your backyard. You can use it as you need it. If you abuse it, it doesn't really work to get you that high anymore. Anybody that smokes a lot of weed will tell you that the only way they can really feel like they got stoned again is if they stop smoking cannabis for a while and then they smoke it again. They're like, oh yeah, wow. But I think that that's also one of the very telling parts of how cannabis is beneficial, because like someone like me, I woke up and I'll smoke cannabis throughout the day, but I won't be high. I can still drive. I can still pilot my motorcycle. I can still work. It doesn't affect me in a negative way at all. But I also don't really get that high from it, mostly because I use it constantly. So that's not something you could do with alcohol. I mean, if I drank alcohol all day, I'd be sloshed at the end of the night. I wouldn't be clear-headed or anything like that. I would never get on a motorcycle after drinking all day. But, I was 12 years old smoking pot all day and riding dirt bikes down trails, and I never crashed, never hit a tree, and if anything, you look at things like the X Games, and you got to be stoned to think about doing a backflip on a motorcycle, man. Seeing those skate kids go 30 feet into the air, there's definitely some marijuana influence there, So, and, I really think in some ways people might consider it a performance enhancement drug, because realistically it helps keep you focused. I mean, if anybody watched, the old Pumping Iron documentary about Arnold Schwarzenegger winning Mr. Olympia for the 5th time, at the end of it, he's puffing a joint. It's the end scenes. He's laying back, hitting some weed. And I think that these guys knew about the benefits and the healing powers of cannabis in the gym a long time ago. It's just that for a long time it was stigmatized and they couldn't talk about it. And I think that's changing. Guys like Michael Phelps, all his gold medals and his swimming and his bongs, I think people are starting to see a different view of it. I mean, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who was the NBA all-time champion scorer for the longest time, he came out as a medical marijuana user because he had headaches, migraine headaches. And I had the great pleasure of meeting him one day, and I asked him, if he ever played high, and he looked at me, he goes, "Do you ever see me play?" And I said, "Of course." He goes, "Well, then you see me play high, because every game I smoke before the game, so I make sure I didn't get a headache." And I was like, wow, and I mean, obviously it didn't affect his career except in a positive way. And then I got the opportunity to co-produce parties for the Marijuana Policy Project at the Playboy Mansion. A lot of people don't know it, but Hugh Hefner was the first real donor to NORML back in 1970. He gave the first $5,000 and then the second $50,000 to get the organization started. Hefner had been a proponent of marijuana legalization, he told me, since the 1950s when the Beats brought it to him. And believe it or not, through the years, Hef was a cookie eater because he couldn't get away with smoking weed because, like, obviously everybody would know he was smoking weed. But he had people in his crew making him cookies, and he had these cookies. He would sit there munching cookies at meetings with liquor executives, and they had no idea that he was just loving it. And he wasn't much of a drinker. People that knew him knew he didn't really drink. And it was just really wild. I mean, I ended up meeting Hef in 1997 after I got busted in Bel Air, and he gave me a hug. And it was after I was on the news all the time. And I was not apologetic after I got arrested. I feel like we should all have a right to cannabis. We should have a right to grow cannabis. Nothing I did was wrong. And he loved it. Because most of the time people get up and like, I'm sorry, don't make me go to prison. And I was like the complete opposite. I was like, go to hell. We have a right.
They make them, sometimes they you have to agree to not go back to activism, right? So they you came out and made movies.
I maxed my time out. When I went to prison, I ended up smoking weed the whole time I was there. Every time I got a chance to, I got some weed. I went to the whole 3 times, not 30 days apiece for smoking weed. I lost my visits for a year for smoking weed. They took away my phone use for 6 months for smoking weed. But when I first went to prison, there was a research paper that came out of Mandarin, Spain, talking about how they were injecting cannabinoids in a glanoma, which is a brain cancer, which right now is incurable. And I read that, and I was a bit troubled because I realized my medical condition could return, and I really don't want to get more tumors. So I wrote to Dr. Grinspoon in Massachusetts, and I said, is there any chance that my cannabis use has been basically keeping my condition at bay? And he wrote me back. He said, it's possible. We won't know because your disease is so rare. It's considered an orphan disease, and they don't study it. But he said that, but there's a possibility. And I made a decision at that point, early in my prison experience, that I was probably, I would rather suffer the consequences of getting caught smoking weed and do the whole time than to try to get good time and get out early and find myself with cancer or dealing with tumors and being sick again. So I said, and I grew. I smoked weed every chance I got. So when I got out of prison, I had pretty much lost a lot of my good time. And I was never one to compromise. I mean, I self-surrendered to prison on, January 3rd, 2000 was a Monday. I always kind of took it head on. All of my heroes like Martin Luther King and Gandhi, they all went to prison for what they believed in. And I felt like if we don't put our bodies on the line, you're never going to stop the train. And I felt like, I was just one person, but I think all of our voices are important, and I think we all need to fight for our rights or we won't have them. So I was grateful, and I don't know, I had a lot of support. Unlike most people that go to prison, I didn't go to prison for something bad. I just went through prison for growing weed, and a lot of people supported that. It didn't matter what race, Black, Mexican, white, didn't matter when, Asian, nobody cared. Everybody was like, weed's cool. Even the prison guards were like, you shouldn't be here. So except some hated me, of course, because of weed. But, when I got out of prison, I just saw nothing but activism because I feel like this helped me a lot. Like, I don't think I would have been able to navigate cancer therapy or my life with a spinal fusion and chronic pain if it wasn't for cannabis. And I think that it's, I've kind of felt like her servant for a long time, but it's a good energy to serve, because I think it will benefit everybody. And I joke that every cop and prosecutor, every judge and jailer that's ever locked me up, and there's been a lot of them, they all have an endocannabinoid system, and someday they will need cannabis too. And they may not understand it now, but they'll understand it later. And I think that made a big impact on it, because the government, when I first started this, none of this information was available. I mean, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have PDFs. There were no websites that you could point to. You had companies like AOL blocking the word hemp from their searches. We did all of our activism going to Kinko's and passing out pieces of paper. And it was a slow and arduous process, but as things progressed, I think that what really changed it is what we're doing right now. Is it's us educating one another and sharing that information to a wider audience, because we are our only teachers in this case. You can't go to school, you can't go to colleges, universities don't teach this, and it's really sad. I mean, we've got medical doctors graduating right now that know nothing about endocannabinoids, nothing about the endocannabinoid system. And that's really pathetic. They don't even teach nutrition to us. I mean, you can get an MD and you don't even have to know about how to eat. That'd be like being a mechanic and not knowing how to put oil and gas and antifreeze in a car. It's ridiculous.
I think it's crazy.
It's crazy. So this is why I'm still an activist. I feel like we need to educate one another. We need to point people towards educational sources that are beneficial. And by doing so, I think that it'll just further the truth, because I think this is all, for me, it's been, a path to the truthfulness of it all. I mean, the history that was kept from us is ours, but we don't know it's ours until we discover it.
Thank you so much, Todd, for joining us on this episode of Behind the Leaf.
I appreciate you having me on.
Let us know where we can find you.
Sure. These days I write for a magazine called Grow. I've been cultivating cannabis since I was 13. I grew this I grew this flower on the cover, but you can catch us at Grow Mag. And my seeds are available. I have a seed company called Authentic Genetics, and my seeds are available at agseedco.com. That's agseedco.com. And all my social media is just my name, Todd P. McCormick. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. All is just Todd P. McCormick.
And thank you guys for joining us on this episode of Behind the Leaf. And we'll see you guys on the next episode.
Thank you.